Stop her. That's the one. The voice cut through the crowded café like a whip, sudden and sharp, pulling every head toward the counter. Amara froze, clutching her coffee cup as a wave of disbelief crashed over her. She was calm, composed, and completely unaware of any wrongdoing, yet here she was, accused of something she had not done, in front of dozens of strangers who now stared, some with suspicion, others with curiosity, and a few with thinly veiled judgment. Her heart raced, her breath caught, and 1,000 thoughts collided in her mind. What had she done to deserve this? How could anyone mistake her for a thief? She opened her mouth to explain, but the words were drowned out by shouts, by the clicking of phone cameras, by the certainty in the accusing voice. Everyone's eyes were on her, and every instinct screamed that she needed to prove her innocence, immediately, before the situation spiraled further out of control. But there was no time, and no space, because in that moment, the world seemed to have decided she was guilty. Before we continue, I want to ask you, who are you, and where are you watching from? Are you in a city like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, or somewhere else entirely? Take a moment to leave a comment, share your thoughts, and while you're here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so you don't miss more stories like this. Now, back to the story. Amara tried to steady herself, to draw a calm breath, but the accusing customer was approaching, pointing directly at her, eyes blazing with conviction. She's the one who stole it. I saw her near the register. Others in the café nodded quickly, repeating the accusation, some whispering, some outright shouting. Amara's coffee trembled in her hands, her stomach twisted with disbelief, and yet she refused to back down. No, I didn't, she said, voice soft but firm. I have no idea what you're talking about. Her protest, however, was met with disbelief. A security guard moved toward her cautiously, a hand raised, signaling her to stay still, while murmurs from other patrons filled the air. Phones came up, recording her, capturing every moment of the chaos as though her life had suddenly become public property, her innocence irrelevant in the face of accusation. People around her whispered and exchanged glances, some skeptical, some curious, but all certain that the woman in front of them was guilty of something she had not done. Amara's mind raced, thinking back to the morning, to the calm walk into the café, to the simple intent of getting a coffee before work, and how all of that had been erased in a heartbeat by one person's claim. Her pulse thundered in her ears, yet she forced herself to remain calm, to not let panic take over, because she knew that any hint of fear or desperation would only confirm the false narrative. The crowd pressed in, space shrinking, eyes staring, judgment hanging thick in the air, and she realized that she was fighting more than a single accusation. She was facing a wall of assumptions, of preconceptions that made her guilty before the facts were even considered. Amara held herself steady, trying again to speak, trying again to assert her innocence. But the voices grew louder, the pointing more pronounced, and the security guard's grip became firmer. The café had transformed from a simple place of routine into a stage of accusation, her dignity hanging in the balance as every patron watched silently, recording and judging. She felt the heat of embarrassment rise, the sting of unfairness, and the tension of the moment pressed on her like a physical weight. Her thoughts flickered to family, friends, colleagues. What would they think? How would they feel knowing she had been treated like this? And yet, even amidst the fear, a small voice inside told her to remain steadfast, to let clarity and truth guide her response, to survive this moment with her composure intact. The accuser's voice cut across again, louder this time, demanding action, insisting that she be stopped, that justice, as he saw it, be served immediately. Patrons shifted uncomfortably, some nodding along, some recording quietly, all witnessing the spectacle of a woman's life momentarily held hostage by one false claim. Amara's mind raced through every possible response, every way to prove she had done nothing wrong. But the immediate need was survival, the need to maintain dignity in the face of accusation. She lifted her hands slightly, palms open, voice calm but unwavering. Please, check the security footage. You'll see I didn't touch anything. The café fell silent for a heartbeat, the demand hanging in the air, as the security guard hesitated, torn between procedure and the rush of public expectation. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "She must be lying. I'm sure that's her. The police should come." And just like that, Amara was surrounded by a complex web of judgment, fear, and assumption, all of it pressing down, all of it waiting for her next move. The chaos, the accusation, and the heavy stare of every witness threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to focus on what she could control: her voice, her composure, and the truth she knew. And so, with a steady breath, she prepared to face the next wave of confrontation, knowing that the moment had only just begun, that the path to proving herself would be difficult, that the eyes of the crowd were upon her, and that her resilience would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Every step, every word, every gesture mattered now, because the world had decided her fate before the facts had spoken, and she would have to navigate this storm of suspicion and prejudice to reclaim her innocence, her dignity, and her voice. The accusation was only the beginning, the spark that ignited a series of events that would challenge not only her patience and courage, but the assumptions and biases of everyone who watched. And as she stood there, in the midst of the growing crowd, the weight of the situation settled fully on her shoulders, a moment of tension so complete it seemed to freeze time, leaving viewers wondering, feeling, and preparing for the inevitable unfolding of a story that would test the power of truth against assumption, the courage of one woman against a sea of judgment, and the consequences of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, judged for who she was rather than what she had done. Amara sat in the sterile, brightly lit room, her hands folded neatly in her lap, heart still racing, mind spinning with disbelief. Every instinct screamed that she was trapped in a nightmare, accused of a crime she had not committed, and yet the officers in front of her seemed to weigh her every word with doubt before they even reached her ears. "Please, I didn't do anything," she said calmly, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. "Check the footage. Ask anyone who saw me earlier this morning. I was nowhere near the register when the robbery happened." The officer across from her raised an eyebrow, skeptical, as though her composed plea was somehow proof of guilt. Outside, in the hallway, she could hear the murmur of other officers, the distant click of phones, and the faint shuffle of patrons waiting, each carrying their own version of the story she could not control. Witnesses had identified her, and the certainty in their voices had made it nearly impossible for anyone else to see past the accusation. Even with her alibi and her clear recollection of events, every word she spoke felt like it collided with an invisible wall of assumption. She tried to recall every detail of the morning, every movement, every interaction, hoping to provide clarity, hoping to bridge the gap between her truth and the world's perception of her. The officers asked question after question, each one laced with doubt, each one hinting that perhaps she had not been entirely honest, though there was no reason to think otherwise. She answered patiently, precisely, refusing to allow frustration or anger to seep into her voice, knowing that any emotional reaction could be twisted against her. Outside the room, her friends had begun to rally, calling lawyers, sending messages, and posting online in a desperate bid to correct the public record before it spiraled further. Social media erupted with conflicting narratives, some standing with her, others doubting, and some entirely convinced of her guilt based on the hastily shared video clips and the initial accusation. Amara focused on the slow, careful examination of the evidence, urging the officers to review every angle, to check timestamps, to speak to every employee and witness. Hours seemed to stretch into an eternity as the security footage from the café, nearby streets, and surrounding shops was gathered, scrutinized, and replayed repeatedly. Each frame, each motion, each glance became critical, every detail a potential piece of proof that could either condemn or exonerate her. She watched in tense silence as investigators paused on moments that captured her in places entirely consistent with her account, yet still doubted how much weight those frames would carry against the certainty of eyewitness claims. Every time someone outside the room checked a phone or whispered a speculation, the weight of public opinion pressed down on her shoulders. She wondered how many people had already decided she was guilty, how many had shared it as truth without a second thought, how deeply a single, unfounded accusation could penetrate the consciousness of a city. As the day wore on, Amara's hope flickered in tandem with the slow progress of the investigation. A single officer began to raise questions about the reliability of the witnesses, noting inconsistencies in their statements, contradictions that suggested memory had been influenced by panic, by bias, or by mere chance. Slowly, cautiously, the threat of possibility that she might be proven innocent began to grow. Yet even as that possibility emerged, her body remained tense, every instinct alert to the danger of premature relief. The phone calls from friends, the text messages from concerned family, the occasional supportive comment online, they all reminded her that the world was watching, judging, reacting to fragments of truth and rumor intermingled. She reflected on the moments in the café, the suddenness of the accusation, the way faces turned, voices rose, and her identity seemed to dissolve under the weight of suspicion. It was not just the fear of legal consequences that pressed on her, but the humiliation, the sharp sting of public scrutiny, the awareness that bias, even subtle, had shaped the perception of her innocence or guilt. And yet, in the midst of that pressure, Amara found a strange resilience within herself, a quiet strength that refused to bend to the rush of assumption, a determination to let facts, not panic or prejudice, guide the outcome. She reviewed every movement in her mind, every detail of the morning, comparing it against the gathered evidence, aware that clarity and calm reasoning would be her strongest allies. As security footage was replayed frame by frame, moments began to align with her testimony. Her presence in the café away from the register, her interaction with the barista, her movement toward the exit, all recorded, all consistent with her story. Officers began to exchange glances, hesitation creeping into their demeanor, as the certainty that had dominated the room earlier began to erode, replaced by cautious reevaluation. Still, no declaration of innocence was made, no public vindication offered, only the slow, methodical unraveling of the initial assumptions that had nearly condemned her. She continued to answer questions with patience, refusing to let frustration show, aware that every reaction mattered, that the smallest misstep could be seized upon by skeptics. Hours bled into each other, punctuated by brief breaks, discussions among officers, and careful review of evidence. Amara's mind remained focused, her body tense, her voice calm yet firm. She felt the weight of every eye, every whispered comment, every camera phone pointed in her direction, all pressing the importance of proving not just her innocence, but her dignity, her right to be seen clearly and fairly. And as the investigation progressed, a subtle shift occurred. Witnesses began to doubt, inconsistencies became undeniable, and the narrative of guilt that had seemed so certain began to fracture. The officers revisited statements, compared footage, and discussed the implications of assumptions formed in the heat of a chaotic moment. Social media commentary slowly changed, allies amplifying the truth, skeptics questioning their own convictions, and the initial wave of condemnation began to ebb. Amara allowed herself a quiet, cautious hope, understanding that the final outcome was not yet certain, but recognizing that patience, evidence, and unwavering truth were beginning to guide the course. And so she remained, calm and composed, a single figure standing against a tide of misunderstanding, public scrutiny, and latent bias, waiting for the moment when the clarity of facts would finally confront the certainty of assumption, and when her innocence could be fully revealed. Every question answered, every frame of footage reviewed, every witness interviewed, built the path toward vindication, and she held herself with quiet dignity, knowing that the journey to truth required endurance, patience, and the refusal to let fear dictate her responses. The day stretched on, tension rising and falling like the slow, steady beat of a drum, each moment reinforcing the fragile balance between judgment and understanding, and leaving the audience waiting, holding their breath, as the threads of the story wove ever closer to the revelation that would finally restore justice and restore Amara's voice in a world that had briefly denied it. The door opened and the real culprit was finally brought forward. A young man whose nervous energy betrayed every attempt to appear calm, and in that instant, the tension that had gripped the room for hours seemed to crack, letting a flicker of relief reach Amara. She had remained still, composed, despite the humiliation, fear, and the weight of every doubtful glance, and now, the truth began to unravel before everyone's eyes. The officers reviewed the new evidence, the security footage from the surrounding streets, the time-stamped transactions, and slowly, the pieces began to fit together, painting a clear picture that exonerated her completely. Witnesses who had pointed and shouted now lowered their heads, murmuring apologies or simply realizing their mistake, a mixture of embarrassment and disbelief washing over the crowd. Amara felt her chest loosen, the invisible chains of accusation beginning to fall away, replaced by a cautious but undeniable sense of vindication. Yet even in that moment of relief, she knew the emotional toll could not simply vanish. She had been publicly accused, scrutinized, and doubted, and the echoes of those hours would remain in her memory, a reminder of how easily assumptions and prejudice could distort reality. The officers approached her gently, offering formal apologies, acknowledging the injustice, yet the crowd continued to murmur, some astonished, some ashamed, as the full story came to light. Social media updates began to correct the misinformation, friends and strangers alike sharing the truth, amplifying her voice after hours of silence. But Amara remained poised, quietly letting the facts speak louder than anger or emotion ever could. The security guard who had initially restrained her nodded with respectful acknowledgement, and even the café staff who had hurriedly reacted joined in a tentative but sincere apology, recognizing the human error and the rush to judgment that had ensnared her. Amara exhaled slowly, a mixture of exhaustion and relief, knowing that the storm of accusation had passed but understanding that her strength had been tested and proven resilient. The crowd that had once been ready to condemn her now watched in silence as the officers closed the case, the weight of their own assumptions settling uncomfortably, the lesson of the day slowly sinking in. She finally stepped forward, her voice calm and firm, speaking to those around her not with bitterness but with quiet dignity, emphasizing the importance of truth over assumption, patience over panic, and integrity over haste. "I hope," she said, her tone steady, "that this reminds everyone to pause before judging, to question assumptions, and to see the whole story before condemning someone else." The room seemed to absorb her words, the atmosphere shifting from tension to reflection. The public acknowledgement of her innocence, a stark contrast to the chaos of earlier hours. The officers confirmed that all charges against her were dropped, the real perpetrator would face justice, and her name was cleared completely. But Amara understood that the lesson extended beyond legal resolution. It was about human perception, bias, and the power of calm, unwavering truth in the face of misunderstanding. Slowly, she gathered her belongings, feeling the eyes of the crowd upon her, not with suspicion this time, but with respect, admiration, or at least recognition of the ordeal she had endured. The whispers that had once spread accusation now carried acknowledgement. The world had seen both the fragility of assumptions and the strength of integrity. She walked through the café one last time, a quiet smile on her lips, not triumphant but steady, aware that the journey through fear, accusation, and doubt had revealed her own resilience and the importance of standing firm even when the world seems against you. Later, outside the building, the day continued as if nothing had happened. Yet something had shifted in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. A lesson about the danger of snap judgments, the reality of prejudice, and the quiet power of truth that refuses to be silenced. Amara reflected on the experience, realizing that the storm of accusation had not only tested her patience and composure, but had also illuminated the subtle ways in which society can rush to condemn without evidence, and how courage, calm, and clarity are the truest tools to navigate such challenges. She understood that her dignity had survived because she refused to fight anger with anger, because she allowed facts to carry the weight that fear and bias could not, and because she remained true to herself even when others doubted her. And as she stepped into the sunlight, leaving the shadow of accusation behind, a quiet strength settled in her chest, a reminder that injustice can be faced with integrity, that mistakes can be corrected, and that the world, while imperfect, can witness truth when one refuses to be silenced. For anyone watching the story, remember that standing up for yourself, trusting your truth, and maintaining your composure can be more powerful than any reaction born from anger or fear. Apologies may be given, justice may be restored, but the real victory is in preserving your own dignity and letting the truth speak louder than doubt ever could. Thank you for following Amara's journey. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of integrity, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and courage. And please hit the like button to support the channel. Every click helps share these stories with others who need to be reminded that the truth matters, that patience matters, and that even in the face of public judgment, one person's steadfastness can shine brighter than all the doubt in the world.